The cameras flashed, the crowd gasped, and Samantha Hayes stood frozen, her champagne glass trembling. Across the ballroom, her billionaire husband, Cole Anderson, kissed another woman, not in secret, but under the bright lights of their own charity gala. Every flashbulb captured her heartbreak. Every whisper carved her humiliation deeper. This was no accident. Cole wanted the world to see her broken. But what no one knew was that Samantha already had a plan. And before the year ended, she would bring him to his knees in a way he'd never recover from. What happens next will shatter reputations, destroy lies, and reveal a betrayal no one saw coming. Stay with me until the very end, because the last twist will change everything you thought you knew. And while you're here, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support means the world, and you won't want to miss stories like this. Now, let's go back to the night it all began. The Anderson Foundation Gala was meant to be the crowning jewel of Samantha's year. Dressed in a sapphire gown, she floated from guest to guest, her smile flawless despite the fatigue beneath it. Then the air shifted. Cole Anderson, her husband of 7 years, entered with Tessa Morgan, a socialite whose name was always tangled in rumors. But tonight, it wasn't rumors, it was proof. Cole leaned in, kissed Tessa on the lips, and didn't care who saw. She froze in disbelief. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a declaration. And the crowd and the cameras caught every second. The music kept playing, but Samantha's world fell silent. She could see guests whispering, phones already out, the glow of recording screens lighting the shadows. Cole met her gaze across the room, his lips curling into a smug half-smile before he turned back to Tessa. He didn't just betray her, he performed it. Samantha's chest tightened, but she refused to crumble here. She turned toward the bar, downed the champagne in her hand, and forced a steady breath. She knew then that this was no longer about saving her marriage. It was about saving herself and ending his game. The next morning, the headlines were merciless. Cole Anderson's public kiss shocks gala crowd, blared one. Samantha Hayes blindsided a charity event, read another. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Friends, reporters, even strangers. She ignored them all. Cole strolled into the penthouse kitchen, humming as he poured coffee. "Don't let it bother you," he said, flipping through the paper. She studied his face, realizing he was testing her. He wanted to see if she'd endure it, just as she had endured all his smaller betrayals before. But Samantha wasn't the same woman she'd been last year. She was already imagining life without him. Cole's arrogance only grew. He started bringing Tessa to more public events, each photo op another blade aimed at Samantha's dignity. Friends urged her to file for divorce, but she smiled and brushed them off. She needed time. Divorce was war, and Cole thrived on winning. But this time, she wouldn't fight on his terms. She began attending charity functions alone, holding her head high, ignoring the pitying looks. Beneath her calm exterior, she was gathering strength. And then, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, fate handed her the missing piece she didn't even know she needed, in the form of Logan Price. 2 weeks later, the cafe smelled of cinnamon and fresh bread. Samantha had come in for a quiet coffee, away from flashing cameras. Then she saw him. Logan Price, broad shoulders, warm eyes, a smile that felt like sunlight after a storm. They hadn't spoken in years, not since a charity build in Chicago. "Samantha Hayes?" he said, surprised. "It's been too long." They talked until the cafe emptied, conversation flowing like they'd never lost touch. For the first time in months, she felt seen. Logan didn't mention Cole. He didn't treat her like a headline. He treated her like a human being. Days turned into weeks, and Samantha found herself looking forward to their meetings. Logan was attentive in ways Cole had never been. He asked about her passions, her childhood, her goals beyond the society circuit. With him, she could laugh without checking her reflection first. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, Logan brushed a strand of hair from her face. She didn't pull away. This was dangerous territory. But instead of fear, she felt hope, something she thought Cole had destroyed forever. And with that hope came a thought she couldn't ignore. Maybe her life wasn't over. 1 month later, the pregnancy test lay on the counter, 2 pink lines staring back at her. Samantha pressed a hand to her stomach, her heart racing. The child was Logan's. The truth brought a strange mix of joy and dread. Cole would assume the baby was his, and she could use that. For years, he had wielded their marriage like a weapon, certain she'd never leave. Now she would use his own arrogance against him. This was the beginning of his end. She wasn't just walking away anymore. She was going to make sure he never recovered from what was coming. When she told Cole she was pregnant, he smirked like he'd already won. "I knew you wouldn't leave me," he said, pulling her close as if nothing had happened. Samantha forced herself not to recoil. Inside, her mind was already spinning. He thought the baby was his leash, but he didn't know she was already meeting with a divorce lawyer, preparing for the cleanest, most devastating exit she could plan. Cole was so sure he controlled the game. He didn't realize he was already losing. And soon, she'd walk away, taking something with her that would break him completely. Weeks later, the papers were ready. Samantha served Cole the night before his biggest business announcement of the year. His smirk faltered for the first time. "You're making a mistake," he said. "You'll come back after the baby's born." She just stared at him, letting the silence cut deeper than words. Then she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Cole was too arrogant to panic. He believed the baby would tie her to him forever. But Samantha knew the truth, and she was counting down the days until he learned it the hard way. 3 months later, Samantha had vanished from the spotlight, settling in a quiet coastal town with Logan. They prepared for the baby together, their home filled with warmth instead of tension. She kept her whereabouts hidden, ignoring every message from Cole. Meanwhile, Cole paraded Tessa in public, telling anyone who'd listen that he was happier than ever and expecting a child. He thought he had replaced her, but the truth was both children, Samantha's and Tessa's, would soon become the source of his greatest humiliation. And when that day came, Samantha planned to watch his perfect image shatter into pieces he couldn't fix. Cole's arrogance reached its peak when he heard Samantha had given birth. He called his lawyer, demanding visitation rights, certain this was his moment to reassert control. "She can't keep my child from me," he told the press. Reporters lapped it up, framing him as a concerned father. Samantha, meanwhile, quietly sent word that he could visit. Once, she chose a location carefully. Her home's front porch, where the truth would hit him like a tidal wave. Logan would be there, holding the baby. Samantha would stand beside him, calm, collected, ready to end this chapter once and for all. 2 weeks later, Cole's car rolled up the coastal driveway, his expression smug. He stepped out in a tailored suit, clutching a gift bag. When Samantha opened the door, Logan stood behind her, cradling the infant. Cole's smile faltered as his gaze locked on the baby's face, and the truth sank in. The child's features mirrored Logan completely. No trace of Cole. His breath caught. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Samantha stepped forward, her eyes cold but steady. "This," she said, "is a family you'll never be part of." Logan's arm tightened around her, sealing the message without words. Cole's jaw clenched. "You're lying. That's my child." Samantha didn't flinch. "You thought a baby would keep me chained to you," she said, her voice cutting through the sea breeze. "You were right, just not your baby." The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. Cole's eyes darted between them, searching for some loophole, some shred of denial he could cling to. But the truth was undeniable. This was the day his ego cracked. Samantha stepped back inside, the door closing slowly, deliberately, until Cole was left staring at the wood grain, the sound of the latch final in his ears. For days after, Cole avoided public appearances. His PR team urged him to control the narrative. But every time he tried, the image of Samantha and Logan standing together came back to haunt him. The media buzzed with speculation about the baby's true father. Some whispered Logan's name. Others dug into his background, painting him as a quiet hero who rescued Samantha from her toxic marriage. Cole couldn't stand it. Every headline was salt in the wound. Still, he clung to the belief that at least he had Tessa, and their unborn child would be his fresh start, his redemption. 1 month later, Tessa was glowing, her baby bump now impossible to hide. Cole attended events with her, smiling for the cameras, eager to shift the public's focus. He spoke about starting over and becoming a better man, lines his PR team fed him. Privately, he saw Tessa as proof that he could still win, that Samantha hadn't truly taken everything from him. This was his lifeline. He began making nursery plans, talking about baby names, imagining headlines about his second chance. What he didn't realize was that the final betrayal, the one that would destroy him completely, was already in motion. It started as whispers, gossip in the kind of circles Tessa moved in. A wealthy older man had been seen slipping into her building late at night. Cole brushed it off as jealous lies. But when photos surfaced online, showing Tessa dining intimately with the man, panic stirred in his gut. He confronted her in private, slamming the door behind him. "Who is he?" Tessa laughed, sipping her wine. "Just someone who makes me feel depreciated." Cole's face flushed with anger. For the first time, he felt the sting of being played. And this was only the beginning. The older man wasn't just wealthy. He was a billionaire with more power and influence than Cole. Paparazzi photos of Tessa and him vacationing in the Bahamas hit the tabloids within days. Cole's phone exploded with calls from reporters asking for comment. His PR team scrambled, urging him to stay calm and stay quiet. But Cole couldn't ignore the sinking suspicion building inside him. Suspicion that this other man might have a deeper connection to Tessa's pregnancy than he wanted to admit. And if that were true, then everything Cole had left to hold on to would vanish overnight. 2 days later, the test results came in a plain envelope. Cole sat alone in his office, staring at it for an hour before finally tearing it open. His hands shook as he read the words, paternity excluded. The baby wasn't his. His vision blurred, rage and humiliation twisting in his chest. Tessa had been using him the entire time, just as he had used Samantha. Now the tables had turned. He had lost everything. Cole slumped back in his chair, the silence of the room deafening, knowing the world would soon learn that both women he had flaunted had walked away for good. The fallout was brutal. Tabloids feasted on the story. Double betrayal. Cole Anderson loses both families. Talk shows mocked him. Late-night comedians turned him into a punchline. Investors pulled out of deals, his company stock wavered, and whispers of his incompetence spread. Cole stopped attending public events altogether, unable to face the cameras. His once untouchable image was in ruins. Somewhere in a quiet coastal town, Samantha saw the headlines and allowed herself the smallest smile. Justice hadn't just been served, it had been televised. And this time, Cole couldn't buy his way out of the wreckage he had created. On a sunlit morning, Samantha walked along the beach with Logan and their baby. The waves kissed the shore, the air clean and free. She felt lighter than she had in years. Cole was just a memory now, a cautionary tale she'd left far behind. Logan lifted their child into the air, laughter ringing out against the ocean breeze. Samantha knew there would still be challenges ahead, but they would face them together. Far away, in a high-rise apartment, Cole stared out at the city skyline, alone, forgotten, and haunted by the family he could never have back. 6 months later, Cole's penthouse, once alive with parties and press events, felt like a tomb. Dust gathered on furniture, unopened mail stacked on the counter. His phone barely rang now, except for debt collectors and lawyers. The silence was suffocating. He scrolled through old photos of Samantha, realizing too late what he had thrown away. Regret was a new emotion for him. Outside his window, the city pulsed with life, uncaring of his fall from grace. Somewhere out there, she was building the life he had promised but never given her, and that knowledge burned more than any headline ever could. Samantha's days were filled with warmth and purpose. She had opened a small interior design studio, her first independent venture in years. Clients came not because of her last name, but because of her talent. Logan stood by her side, encouraging her every step. Their baby's laughter echoed through their sunlit home, a constant reminder of how far she'd come. Occasionally, she'd hear whispers of Cole's downfall, but she no longer cared. His story was no longer part of hers. The chapter was closed, and the ending had been written on her terms, not his. Cole tried reaching out once, a short, desperate email with no subject line. It simply read, "I'm sorry. I miss you." Samantha stared at it for a moment before deleting it without replying. Some wounds don't need reopening. She closed her laptop and turned toward Logan, who was reading to their baby in the living room. The sight melted her heart. This was home now. Not marble floors and designer gowns, but love, trust, and laughter. She had no need to revisit the past, especially when the future she'd once dreamed of was right here, holding her hand. 1 year later, the anniversary of the gala arrived. The night everything had changed. Samantha barely noticed until she saw the date on the calendar. A year ago, she had been humiliated under the glittering lights. Now, she was standing in her own boutique, surrounded by friends and clients celebrating her business's success. Logan handed her a glass of champagne. "To new beginnings," he said. She smiled, clinking her glass against his. Outside, the winter night sparkled. But this time, the lights weren't harsh or blinding. They were warm, welcoming, a reflection of the life she had claimed for herself, far from Cole's shadow. Cole's life, however, had become a cautionary tale whispered among the elite. Investors avoided him, women stayed away, and the media treated him as yesterday's scandal. He sat alone in restaurants, ignored where once he had been the center of attention. His fortune was dwindling, legal fees mounting. Every time he thought about calling Samantha, pride stopped him. Not because he didn't want her back, but because he knew she'd never answer. He had destroyed his own empire, and the ruins were to live in day after empty, lonely day. One rainy evening, Cole spotted Tessa across the street. She was stepping out a chauffeured car, laughing with the older billionaire she'd left him for. They didn't notice him. Cole stood there, drenched, watching them disappear into a private club. It hit him like a physical blow. He wasn't even part of her story anymore. He was just another chapter she had closed. And unlike Samantha, Tessa had no grace in her departure. She had taken what she wanted and left him with nothing. For the first time, Cole truly felt small. Spring, Samantha's boutique expanded to a second location, and her name was becoming recognized in design circles. She was invited to speak at events, her story inspiring others to reclaim their independence. She rarely mentioned Cole by name, only referring to a past that taught me everything I needed to know about strength. Logan sat in the audience at every talk, their baby now toddling between their legs. Samantha had learned that revenge wasn't about destruction. It was about rebuilding so beautifully that your absence became someone else's biggest regret. And in Cole's case, she knew that regret was permanent. Cole, meanwhile, sold his penthouse and moved into a smaller apartment to cut costs. The walls felt too close, the air too still. Nights stretched long, filled with restless pacing and staring out windows. He thought about calling Tessa, but what would he say? That he missed a woman who had betrayed him too? There was no one left to listen. Every so often, he'd see Samantha's name in an article about her growing business. He couldn't bring himself to read them. It was easier to imagine her struggling than to face the truth. The truth was, Samantha wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. She and Logan took weekend trips with their child, capturing moments in photographs that filled their home. They had laughter, inside jokes, shared dreams, the things money couldn't buy. Samantha had once thought revenge meant seeing Cole in pain. Now she understood it was about living a life so full, his absence didn't matter. She tucked her child into bed one night and whispered, "We're safe now." Logan's arm wrapped around her waist, and for the first time in years, she believed it. Final reflection. Cole sat in a dimly lit bar, nursing a drink. Around him, younger businessmen laughed loudly, making the same mistakes he once had. He wanted to warn them, but what would he say? That arrogance had cost him everything? That love was only real when you respected it? No one would listen. He wouldn't have listened. He raised his glass in a bitter toast to no one in particular. Outside, life went on, vibrant and uncaring. Somewhere across town, Samantha was likely laughing with her family, blissfully unaware he was thinking of her. And maybe that was for the best. Samantha stood on her porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Logan joined her, slipping an arm around her shoulders. Their child giggled in the yard, chasing bubbles that glistened in the fading light. "We did it," Logan murmured. She smiled, leaning into him. "Yes, we did." The horizon stretched endlessly ahead, free of shadows from the past. In the distance, waves crashed against the shore, steady, certain, eternal. And with each breath, Samantha felt lighter, knowing she had taken back her life, one choice at a time.